But, I also think, I have unapologetically, and I hope people in my life can, could say this about me as well. I've unapologetically accepted so many people and their flaws because I think people deserve to be accepted. And I think, when people struggle with things like exhibitionism or voyeurism, a lot of people turn their nose up at it instantly because they are just so taken aback by the behavior. But there is usually trauma or a story underneath it that if you just took the time to know the person, you would understand their intent is not to harm people. Their intent, and I'm a big believer that there's intent versus impact, and there's an impact with people's behaviors that they are participating in, but and this is not everybody. Some people want to hurt other people, but for the most part, the people, that I've worked with, they feel incredible remorse and incredible guilt and incredible shame, and they don't know why it's a part of their life. So it's just about wanting to give everybody a space to be able to process because everybody deserves that.
Welcome to Season 2 of The Cultured Therapist, a podcast for the curious and the bold to come together and discuss topics, interests, and experiences of the mental health care field. I'm your host, Arsene Winters, a licensed professional counselor in the state of Louisiana, and I work in the field in private practice. Each episode, I interview a helper from a specific region of the United States that is providing care for others through this work. And we take the time to get to know them and the topics they feel therapists, clients, and the public at large might benefit from hearing more about. With so many topics to choose from, there is bound to be something here for everyone. Today I introduce you to Callie Wilson, a licensed professional counselor and Natchez, Mississippi native specializing in trauma and couples work. She has served in multiple areas of the mental health field and has presented at several conferences dedicated to mental health. She uses evidence-based approaches to help clients address the roots of distress and move forward with confidence. Her work incorporates eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, which helps the brain process distressing memories so they feel less overwhelming. She also uses deep brain reorienting, or DBR, which works with early pre-verbal trauma responses to release stuck emotions and sensations and help clients feel grounded. And she also uses cognitive processing therapy, or CPT, which teaches clients to identify and challenge unhelpful beliefs about trauma, reducing anxiety and promoting a sense of control. Callie also has immersive in-field training to support first responders, particularly firefighters. She has completed over 200 hours of trauma-focused training and 150 hours in couples counseling, and she is certified to train others in a couples counseling curriculum. She has a heart to continue learning and growing in her competency to steward her clients' mental health with care. Baton Rouge has been her home for the past 4 years, where she lives with her husband, and she feels privileged to walk alongside clients as they heal and grow. Now, Callie reached out to me recently after having been on other podcasts to discuss her expertise and love of the helping profession. This time, she wanted to try to simply have a conversation expressing that it was part of her goal to try to do this without her typical intensive preparation. She seemed pleasantly surprised to find that she was able to find all the paths and opportunities for her to provide an intriguing and enjoyable conversation about her journey. From her own struggles with OCD, to working with DBR as a modality, to modality barriers with cognitive processing therapy, and then onto her work with couples, with infidelity, with sex addictions, and eventually into her presenting at conferences, and finally how she believes her values best attend to her profession. We basically go all over, but magically she is able to bring us back to the heart of the conversation, which is that this is all about heart, and that's a lovely thing to notice. So cozy up with a warm, gentle beverage, maybe your favorite blanket. Take a deep, calming breath, and we'll go together into getting to know Callie Wilson. Let's jump in.
Yeah, so I kinda have a little bit of a twisted, it's very windy how I got there, but growing up, I had a little bit of a tumultuous childhood with just some relational and like blended family dynamics. And I saw a counselor whenever I was younger, and I think I only saw her a few times, but it was a meaningful experience. And I appreciated that. So I do remember very early on, I think I was in fifth grade, that I was kind of just, I really appreciated what she was able to do for me in just one or two sessions. And I thought it would be nice to be able to do that for other people. But for the most part, I was always the friend that everybody came to, which is a a story from most therapists, but I was the friend that always had, like, sound advice and was very calm in chaotic situations and was just the person that people came to. You too, yeah. It started with there, and then as I grew up, I did not realize it early on, although looking back, I can see it everywhere in my life, but I was diagnosed with OCD in 2022 and just like during grad school because I was learning about it. And I was like, oh, wow, I've had this my whole life and I never knew it. But I don't treat people with OCD, even though it's very common for people to have OCD, but it pops up everywhere in my life, especially now as a counselor. So, long story short, I was the friend that everybody came to. I struggled with my own mental health stuff and then struggled with some relational stuff. Ended up me getting into the profession, and it's been fantastic ever since. There's ups and downs, but it's been great.
How does the experience with OCD inform your counseling style?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it more than anything, I mean, obviously, there's clinical insights that I get from it, but I think more than anything, it really, really widened my net for empathy with people who struggle with it because it's not just something that people can say, oh, I have OCD. It's just something that you have to be okay with me having. It can be a very debilitating thing that we live with. And so it really widened my window to be able to look at people and be kind and be compassionate and be empathetic. And I like to think of myself as that person organically, but whenever you know and have walked through the experience of OCD, you know how difficult it can be. And so looking at other people and being able to say, I know this is hard and I've walked through it and I'm with you. And as you're walking through it has just been such a good life lesson, I think, for me on compassion and grace for other people.
Do you feel that those with OCD tend not to have it normalized as much as it could be? Or does it feel like lately the conversation and narrative has been more understanding?
I think that with social media and with counseling being more socially acceptable as the years go on, it's being brought into more conversations. I think it is being spoken about as through an empowered lens, but also half of the time I think it's too normalized in a way, OCD specifically, and I think that people don't understand that OCD can be one of many things. And people don't talk about the OCD that's societally shaming or societally unacceptable. They just talk about the OCD that, well, I like my house to be tidy, or I don't like to be wet, or whatever it is that kind of feels a little bit more easier to talk about. But some OCD can be incredibly debilitating for people. And I think that's the side that we haven't necessarily arrived to speaking about. So to answer your question, I think it's been normalized, but not in all of the most, like, healthy and respectful ways.
Can you give me a specific example of a societal shaming version of OCD?
Yeah, so I haven't experienced this myself, but I have had clients and I've had personal friends in my life who really struggle with, you know, having this fear that they are going to do something sexually inappropriate to other people, or that they may have at one point in their life had a thought about somebody that was underage, even though that wasn't something that was truly a part of their heart or truly a part of who they were. But I mean, you can't go to a random person and just say, "Oh, I thought that maybe I was attracted to this young girl and her body," like, because it's just immediately, well, you're a pedophile or you're somebody that can't be trusted around kids. And, that's not the heart of people with OCD that struggle with pedophilia OCD. It's actually a huge fear that they're going to be that or disrupt society or not contribute well to society in this way. And that is the part of OCD that's not talked about enough because it's a very, very shaming experience.
It sounds like intrinsically, by them having those questions, they already dismantle the problem which they fear they're having.
Yeah, which, that's the thing with OCD is that you can logically talk yourself into believing that, "No, this is not me. I'm not myself whenever I'm having an OCD week," or whatever you wanna call it, but it's the true fear that is driving the thoughts constantly, and you can't really logic your way out of that, and it can get really hard. Yeah.
I noticed that you have a number of modalities that you're trained in, and I wanted to give you a chance to maybe talk about a modality that I've only heard from one other person, but I find it to be really fascinating. And it's called deep brain reorienting, right? I'm saying that right?
Yeah. Yes.
DBR?
DBR is a newer modality. I think I could be wrong in this, but I think it was around 2018 that it was developed. I need to go back and check that, but still relatively new to the field, given like up against EMDR or CBT or CPT, that those sorts of modalities. So it was not developed in the United States. It was developed Scotland or Ireland, one of the two, and by somebody named Dr. Frank Corrigan. He discovered that other modalities was working well on the upper level thinking, which is the cognitive level thinking of the trauma that happened. So, walk me through the event that happened and how it's stored in your body, and like, let's reprocess the actual event. Whereas DBR targets the pre-verbal response to the actual event. So, like, the very first moment that your body registered and, "Oh, no, something's going wrong." That moment is not processed through other modalities like it is in DBR, and it's specifically because DBR pinpoints a specific place in your brainstem, which is like EMDR doesn't reach that far. So, in my opinion, it bridges the gap between we're gonna process everything and how we feel it in the actual event, but how do we process that first pre-verbal, "I don't know what's happening in my surroundings, but I know something's wrong because I can feel it" moment? And it's been fantastic in my work that I've done with people, and I've only been doing it for about a year, so it's been great.
You said it targets a particular part of the brainstem that EMDR won't reach. Can you
Mhm.
tell me more about that?
Yeah, so whenever we're doing EMDR, this is how they talk to us in the training for DBR, but they say whenever we're processing with DBR, we want for you to turn off your upper level thinking. So like whenever you're thinking about this specific moment that your body registered, "Oh no," we want for you to not think about it. Like don't use words, don't use logic, but really feel the sensation in your body and where it's located. And so through the process of DBR, it activating this specific area of your brainstem sends actual sensations through your body. And it's kind of hard to explain, but you feel the sensation and the tension in your body kind of move from one place to another, and that activation of the brainstem is the thing that actually does that. So, with EMDR, we're having people think about a specific picture of a moment plus the negative cognition that's been attached to or linked to the actual event. DBR says we're not gonna think about any of that, and we're just gonna feel it move throughout our body. That's the part that the brainstem activates that EMDR does not reach.
And when a person feels it throughout their body, what is the mechanism of action that in turn helps the brain to then, I guess, adapt it? Is it similar to EMDR in
I
that
would
way?
say I would say it's similar to EMDR in the way that you really give it time for the body to process, like, you don't rush it, you move very slowly with the feeling. So, oftentimes, for example, we'll have a lot of people who feel disgust in their stomach, or they might say, "I'm feeling a lot of pain behind the back of my eyeballs," and that's shock that's moving from the brain to other parts of your system, but it's more or less like, let's just slow down and give that pain time to, like, exist for a minute, and eventually it'll go away. And it does every time. If you don't try to wish it away or if you don't try to speed up the processing, it just is there until it's not, or it's there until it's moved somewhere else. Does that answer your question?
Not only does it answer my question, but it raises new questions.
Okay.
So, when you're doing the DBR work, are you guiding them through those sensations in a particular way? Like, is there a protocol that you use?
Yes. Yes. So they gave us a script similar to EMDR whenever we got trained for DBR, but truly what DBR looks like compared to EMDR is we're going to do bilateral stimulation for 40 seconds to a minute, and we're gonna turn it off and ask for the cognitive like, the conscious cognitive thoughts that are coming to your mind. With DBR, we are only asking for the client to let us know when that physical sensation moves throughout their body. So, the protocol for DBR is to orient yourself to the room first and foremost. There's an exercise that you do called the orienting tension, or you find the orienting tension, and then you do the exercise. I'm blanking on the name right now, but you orient yourself as a clinician to the client, and then both of you are orienting to the room around you. So you're getting a sense of how far you are from the walls, from the ground, from the ceiling, from outside of the room that you're in, and then outside of the building that you're in. And you're building this really huge sense of groundedness in the room with where you are. After you do the exercise, you tell them we find the orienting tension, which is the first whenever you turn your attention to this first moment that you thought something was wrong, where do you feel that tension? You find it, and then you start asking them to really sense deeply into that feeling. Go really down into it, try to turn the upper level thinking off, and let's just feel. And usually what happens is you either get clients who get so focused on feeling the feeling that they forget to tell you, and so you have to check in with them every so often, but usually what happens is they'll open their eyes after they're feeling something and they might say, I feel this sense of nausea in my stomach, or I feel in my right foot I'm having some pain. Or a lot of times we get a lot of really hard and painful tension behind the eyeballs or around like the cheekbones. And really the protocol for it is to, okay, I want for you to breathe slowly, and I want for you to really just sink deep down into that pain or that feeling that you're feeling. And eventually it moves somewhere else, and eventually it goes away, and eventually sometimes it might get worse, like the pain might get worse, but all of that is part of the processing and the movement of the sensation through your body. So as long as you are not rushing them in your protocol and you let them take their time, that is all that the protocol is. And at the end of the protocol, at the end of the DBR session, you ask them, does this make you feel a certain way that's different about yourself than whenever we first started this? And they might say, yeah, I actually feel more compassionate towards my situation. Or I've very frantically didn't know what to do in this situation, but have since have learned somebody might say, yeah, I'm actually more pissed off at myself. So there's a plethora of things that happen, but the goal is for them to be able to look more compassionately at themselves and for their body to actually let go of some of the things that they have been holding for so long. So long-winded way of answering that, but you just go slow and you let the pain and the feelings take their time.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to like a somatic, I don't
As
wanna say experience,
very somatic, yes.
but it has that sense of you go inward, you feel in the body, and that is the processing that needs to happen more so than the cognitive.
Absolutely. You're nail on the head right there.
Okay. 'Cause I was like, "I hope I'm getting this right, because that's
You
that's
are.
what it sounds like, and it's really interesting because it does hit, like you said, that the pre-verbal side, which yeah.
Yeah, I whenever we were doing the training, we obviously had a practicum where we had to be the client, and somebody else who was doing the training had to be the clinician. And I use my example whenever I was processing to really teach or show people how this works. And so like my example whenever I did the practicum was, I think it was about 3 years ago. My mom's a travel nurse, and so she travels to a new place, like, every 3 to 6 months and does nursing, and sometimes that means she's really far away from here, and sometimes that means she's very close. So she was working in New Orleans, and New Orleans is not a super safe area, but she, on top of that, was working at a very unsafe hospital in an unsafe area, and I was constantly anxious about her getting shot or just something happening because of the nature of the hospital and the nature of the area that she was in. And she called me And I ended up figuring out that it was a butt dial hours later, but she ended up calling me at like 5:15 or 5:20 in the morning, which is very abnormal because I'm not up at that time, but I know that she's at work at that time. And I answered the phone, and all I could hear was alarms going off in the background. I had no idea what was going on, but that very first moment, like, you would think that moment that I heard the alarms was the moment that I had that pre-verbal fear, but it was actually the minute that I saw her phone call at 5:15 in the morning. And so while I may have gone in and processed with EMDR the actual event that took place and, like, the cognition that was associated with it, DBR would back up and say, "We gotta, like, feel what your body felt the moment you saw the call." So, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but what ended up happening was just, like, the perfect storm of events that my mom had a bucket of sterile supplies in her hand, and she had gone through an exit door that was not supposed to be exited, so the alarms were going off and the bucket was hitting the wall as she was, like, trying to figure out how to not make the alarm go off anymore, but I thought that the bucket hitting the wall was gunshots, plus the alarm, like, so much was just being assumed in my mind whenever that wasn't really happening, but, yeah, DBR says, like, "Yes, you experiencing that was probably very traumatic," and it was. But we need to talk about that moment, that pit that you felt in your stomach the moment you saw your mom call you at 5:15, and that's the easiest way I can describe it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It does because there's this sort of recognition that if we discount a part of the total experience, then that is still that residue or that I don't wanna call it detritus maybe, I don't know, but it's still there.
Yeah.
The initiating event is still there.
Right, right. So, without doing the practicum, for that probably was about a year in between, I processed that event with my EMDR therapist at the time, and, like, I still every time my mom called me, I thought that she was gonna tell me my grandmother had died, that she was in a situation that was really difficult. It was just this, like, activation constantly around her phone
Mhm.
call, and anytime that she accidentally butt dialed me and she wasn't on the other end, I was panicking, and it was just this horrible, like I said, storm of events that happened, but it's stored in my brain as this is dangerous, something wrong is happening, and especially whenever you have OCD, not to mention you absolutely just run crazy with the catastrophizing of the events that you have experienced, and it was not a fun time, and so I have not truly. I know a lot of people will probably feel skeptical after hearing this, but I truly have not felt as anxious over the last year and a half since doing DBR myself whenever my mom calls me, and I really think it's because I needed to process the phone call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wh when you say you think people might be skeptical, what reasons do you think that would be?
I just think that this is not very professional language, but I think people look at EMDR and look at DBR and look at somatic experiencing or hypnosis and they go, "Oh, that's like too woo woo for me." And I
Yeah,
was I was a part of that population before I got
same.
trained.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think, and also I think people are very set on this is just what my life has to be, and I have to learn to be more resilient. I have to learn how to cope better, and we take responsibility for something that doesn't fully need to be there, and so I think we just assume things are gonna fail whenever it comes to our personal lives that we just don't even try it in the first place. So, I have to really sell EMDR and really sell DBR. I'm just like, "You have to submit to the process and see what happens," but most of the time, everybody that I go to, they're kind of just like, I just don't think this is gonna work for me, or I don't understand the science behind it, and I understand. I was them before all of this.
Right, right. That's interesting you bring that up too, because one that's more easily accessible for a lot of people is CPT, which you had said earlier. You weren't repeating CBT twice. It's
Yeah,
CPT, which is cognitive processing
processing.
therapy. Yeah, tell me a bit about CPT and your experience with that and how that works.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I was approached by the wellness director of St. George Fire Department, who is right down the road from me, and she was trying to expand the bandwidth of culturally competent therapists to treat firefighters and first responders, so EMS, paramedics. law enforcement, firefighters, the whole communications, the whole spectrum that first responders is. And it intrigued my interest because I've always wanted to either work in, which sounds silly now that I'm saying it out loud, but I always wanted to work in the jail system. I wanted to work with a lot of corruptedness, and I never really found an outlet to be able to explore that post grad school. But Amanda, who is the director of wellness there, she approached practice that I was at, and I was gung ho for it then. But, anyways, we had to do a year-long training that required lots of cultural competency courses, and then I had to do in the field experiential training with firefighters. So I did 3 12-hour ride along shifts with one of the local fire departments and went to calls and went to the grocery stores and all the things with them, but a part of I'm finally getting there. A part of that training was that we had to get CPT trained because it's an evidence-based practice and it's used a lot with military and first responders. So I never organically planned on getting trained in CPT, and truth be told, I hadn't really heard of it before she approached me with it. But then I got trained in it as a part of this requirement to be able to be contracted with the fire department. And it's a pretty neat modality that's very helpful for people that can really dive into the process. I have some of my own opinions about it that I know other therapists differ from, but I think it works better whenever it's actually not as structured as it is intended to be, because I feel like it rushes the process a good bit. But whenever you have a client who's very diligent and very organized, it can be 10 to 12 weeks and you be over it and processed and have rewritten the narrative. So my clinical opinion of it is that it's a strong modality. I think that it needs to not be as, yeah, I guess, as strict or as structured, and I think it could actually flourish a lot more, but it's good. It's good for a certain type of people.
What is the main mechanism of action with cognitive processing? Like, how does it present to the client? I know it's a lot of paper, right? A lot of
It's a ton.
forms.
Yes, it is a
Yeah.
ton. CPT's main focus is to rewrite a narrative that we have written about ourselves whenever a specific event has happened in our life and we have convinced ourselves that it's something that it truly wasn't. And CPT is designed to Socratically get your wheels moving on the inside and like try to get you to be open to different perspectives that you may not have considered in the first place. So the mechanism is Socratic questioning plus being able to go and actually do the homework and see that there are different opportunities and different perceptions that you have missed along the way, and a lot of times you get that through the homework, but it is 10 to 12 sessions of homework every single day for the 10 to 12 weeks, and you don't skip a day. It is every day, and it's a lot of redundancy in the homework, but it's purposeful redundancy, and yeah, it when done well, the homework is fantastic, but if you're gonna be willy-nilly or loosey-goosey about it, it's definitely not for you.
Mm. Yeah, I know that you have to like write out the experience in full detail over and over and over and over and over again. And there's an exposure element to this. But I've also thought, okay, well, how does that work if a person's becoming flooded or overwhelmed to a point where they can't do the homework and they're at home by themselves doing this?
Yep.
And often thought that might work for some, but what about for those, who get overwhelmed? What do you think about that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a huge flaw of CPT, if I'm being fully transparent. I've had clients who have not been able to complete the 10 to 12 weeks or to complete the homework, or they say, I want to do the homework during session with you because I can't handle it at home. And, in session, we have to be doing other things other than homework to complete the structure of CPT. So, I think there's already requirements for who could be a good CPT candidate and who wouldn't, and I don't know those specifically off the top of my head, but I do know that one of them, in my personal clinical opinion, is that they have to be able to go home and do the homework, and that means that they have to have some level of desensitization already to the event that we're processing, but CPT doesn't necessarily call for that. So, yeah, I have had clients who go home and they're just like, "I cannot handle doing the homework here," and eventually we had to cease CPT because we couldn't get through the structure of it. So, going back to what I initially said is that, my opinion on that flaw piece of it is that I think it being so structured actually, it is a direct barrier to people actually getting through the modality in the first place. So I'm not sure if that will ever change, but how I do it in my practice is a little bit less of a little bit less of like we have to do it this way or it won't work. I just want some more flexibility.
Absolutely. I noticed the issue with that as well when I did work with the few clients I've used it with, that if they had an issue and didn't have the grounding or didn't have the real rehabilitation component, there might be some considerable barriers.
Yeah.
I wanted to move on to something that I find really fascinating, which is that not only do you do this work, but you also work with couples.
Yes.
And you've had an experience with working with couples in this specific way with sex addiction, affair recovery from infidelity, and then moving through that to the other side. So I was curious if you could speak on that.
Yeah, so transparently, and I hope I don't get a lot of, like, hate for this, it's not the infidelity world and the affair recovery world is not my favorite, but it's so common that, like, I have to be okay with working with it. But, yeah, so the last practice that I was at before I opened my private practice, I was the clinical director for a practice that specialized in sex addiction and porn addiction, process addictions, if you will, and we did mostly affair recovery work or main which the word affair could mean a spectrum of things to different people, but we worked a lot with infidelity, whether it was financial infidelity, it was person infidelity, whether it was pornography infidelity, whatever it was. And I actually ended up there very scared to work with that population because my husband and I, hopefully he doesn't kill me for saying this on podcast, but we actually waited to have sex until we got married as a part of our dedication to our religion. And I had no idea. I had no knowledge of sex or had no knowledge of how porn could be so invasive in people's life, and I had no knowledge or no exposure to what early exposure to those things could do to people or what sexual trauma could do to couples and relationships. And so I went in very blind, but I felt very led to that place, and I still don't really know the reason. But my master's degree is actually not in clinical mental health; it's in marriage and family therapy systems theory. So I had this want and need to bring systems to wherever I went, and that usually meant working with couples and families, but whenever I arrived at Baton Rouge, I quickly learned that people don't like to work with couples, and which is crazy because everybody where I went to school in that town is just like, "This is all that we do." We don't really do individual counseling, and if we do, it's like anxiety or depression, and it's not bigger things. So I came to this practice with none of this knowledge other than how to do couples therapy, and yeah, I grew a lot and I learned a lot, and I owe a lot to the place that I was working that expanded my knowledge into this field because once I learned it, I could not unsee it. It was everywhere I went. Everybody had a vice, everybody had something, and I just had not been exposed to that in my life. So I learned a lot through my experience there and really how to handle that, which is it's just this whole new world of things, but I still work a lot with one of my older coworkers. Now we are a part of a collective together. We both came to the new practice at the same time, and that's predominantly her work, and I work with her whenever it comes to having to do disclosures and therapeutic separations and all of these things. So, it's still a big part of my life even though it's not something I'd, like, typically say I specialize in.
Can you tell me more about the experience of it? Like, how do you help a couple, for example, through this sort of betrayal?
Yeah, so it kinda depends on what the couple wants to do. Some couples are straight to the path of, "I don't wanna try this, I don't think reconciliation's in our future," and so sometimes we work with couples who have made up their mind on divorce or separation, and we walk through what that experience is like with them. And then we have some people who come in and they're like, by any means, I want to do whatever I can to save our marriage. And transparently, it has to do with the level of severity that we're dealing with whenever it comes to certain affairs, because you have one night stand affairs, and then you have affairs that have been happening for 20 plus years in a marriage with multiple escorts, and there's financial betrayal and or a massage parlor. That's another big one, or just, everywhere being a slippery slope, and that's when we kind of get into the sexual addiction category where we're checking on things like that. But typically, what me and Christy, my coworker, do is we will partner. One of us will work with the partner and the betrayed partner, and the other will work with the person who was a part of the affair. And we follow a protocol called a therapeutic disclosure. And that's a series of like several assignments and work that we do together over a period of several months that eventually gets us to the place of truth and discovery of all of the affairs. And then we work together. I mean, it takes a very long time, but work together through that process. And then if depending on if the couple after disclosure wants to work on things or not, we work on emotional resiliency regulation with them, more couples related things at that point. And if not, we work on, well, what's next for us. So it really can go so many different directions, but we do a lot of disclosures.
There does seem to be, from what I've seen with couples counseling, a great distancing between the sex addiction side of things and that reconciliation piece.
Mhm.
I have noticed that a lot of times the two don't really coalesce well because the sex addiction side is an individual issue that interrupts intimacy. And I wanted to know if you could speak on the intimacy side of how this shows up in the work.
Yeah, I mean, it disrupts intimacy a lot, but it's not just, the most common form of intimacy that people think of when we say that word is physical or sexual intimacy, and really this disrupts the emotional intimacy times 10. And, it could be different for each couple, and, some people will say, "Well, emotional affair is worse than physical affair," and some people will say the opposite, but it takes so much work and so much time for trust to be rebuilt that, in my opinion, the emotional intimacy is disrupted the most. But it's just this, you know most of the time, I don't think in my career yet I've had somebody within a year of marrying someone that there was an affair, but most of the time there's people who have years under their belt and history under their belt with this person that they struggle immensely with. How did I not know that this is who I was with? Or how could I be so blind to not see this? So then it turns into a personal responsibility of them not being intelligent enough to catch it. Like there's this plethora of problems that we get into. It's just like this huge onion of complexity. So, long story short, I just think that emotional intimacy is the biggest thing that's disrupted, and it's on multiple different levels.
Whenever it comes to those who have concerns with pedophilia, do you work with that population as well?
I have not. I don't. There's a specific place here in Baton Rouge that we refer that to, but I have worked with exhibitionism and voyeurism in the past, and those are 2 that don't get talked about very much easy that also fall under the category of sex addiction. But no, nothing with pedophilia or underage.
What were those experiences like working with voyeurism and exhibitionism?
Yeah, I was still like a brand new baby therapist whenever I got the exhibitionism case, so I was very afraid of it, to be honest, because the client was also showing exhibitionist behaviors in session as well, so it was just a lot going on with me being brand new. But I, with this specific client, learned again, this is going to sound twisted to some people, but how to show a lot of empathy towards him, because his behavior was a product of his environment growing up and what was modeled for him. And, this person that was doing things that was harmful to other people, I was able to really get an inside view of feeling, bad for him and feeling empathetic for his situation when most people would look at him and judge him and say, "What the heck's wrong with you?" So it was very interesting. I ultimately referred him out because I didn't feel like I had enough experience to really be helpful with him, and he was in some legal trouble at the time as well. And I wanted to be a good steward of quality mental health care for him, and it just wasn't me at the time. So I ended up referring him out. But as far as the voyeuristic behaviors, I still work with clients who have difficulty with that. But the experience is us really slowing down and figuring out why this is something that gets them aroused and walking through the process of how to realign your attention back away from the how to notice that we have temptation, but then realign with our values and our morals in life, and also what's legal. It's a lot of exploration in the process of therapy.
Sounds really interesting. And again, could be terrifying depending upon
Yeah.
what position you're put in as a professional.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
It could be, but I also think, I have unapologetically, and I hope people in my life can could say this about me as well. I've unapologetically accepted so many people and their flaws because I think people deserve to be accepted. And I think, when people struggle with things like exhibitionism or voyeurism, a lot of people turn their nose up at it instantly because they are just so taken aback by the behavior. But there is usually trauma or a story underneath it that if you just took the time to know the person, you would understand their intent is not to harm people. Their intent, and I'm a big believer that there's intent versus impact, and there's an impact with people's behaviors that they are participating in, but and this is not everybody. Some people want to hurt other people, but for the most part, the people, that I've worked with, they feel incredible remorse and incredible guilt and incredible shame, and they don't know why it's a part of their life. So it's just about wanting to give everybody a space to be able to process because everybody deserves that.
Yeah, it goes back to that non judgmental, compassionate job
Mhm.
description is, I mean, it's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it surprises me sometimes when people don't understand that that's the job. The job is, just because I disagree with something and I wouldn't do it does not mean I'm not going to make a safe space for that to be explored.
Yeah, and people not talking about it keeps them trapped in it. And, if we want for them to not engage in the things that have been harmful to other people or themselves, we have to give it space to air out. That's just truly what I believe about situations and people.
I notice that you have done a lot of presenting I say a lot of presenting. You have presented at conferences. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's a lot, but I was curious, how do you prepare for presenting at a conference and what is it usually like when you're at a conference?
Yeah, so first things first, I have to make sure that I'm, gonna make it to the conference because I have very nervous, stomach and very nervous brain, everything, so I have to make sure that I physically make it there, but preparation really, I think that I probably over prepare, and I intentionally didn't prepare for our interview today because I wanted to try something different, and I'm actually feeling a lot better than I have with other presentations and interviews that I've done, but I usually will prepare to the utmost, and if somebody asks me this, I have to have an answer for that, and typically, it makes me more anxious when I do that. So, in the past, that's how I've prepared. I probably won't, especially after today, moving forward with how great it's been not having this huge preparation and how much more freeing it feels to not be so bound to a specific answer. But yeah, I obviously do my research and I get my clinical expertise in order and usually have an outline. I talk to a lot of people, get a lot of encouragement from my community, and then I just go and I pray that it goes well.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I've discovered is the power of I don't know. When I
Yeah.
worked as a professor for a little bit, I discovered that the power of I don't know is more powerful than we give it credit for because being an expert does not mean you are the divine God essence that knows all and is omnipotent and present and all that.
Yeah, and I think in a world where we are all feeling the pressure of being perfect all the time and not misstepping, being able to not be perfect, even as soul crushing as it can feel sometimes, gives us the freedom to be human, because we're not supposed to have everything down pat and we're not supposed to know everything. And that's what the beauty of life experience is for us to eventually arrive at a place where I feel really solid about what I'm talking about. But I do have a very strong belief that, and this is a very cliche thing, but I have a strong belief that we should never ever want to stop learning how to be better or learning how to make the mistake better the next time that we make it, because we're going to make the same mistake more than once. And we just need to be able to give ourselves permission to not know. And that's great. I had a professor in graduate school for the first time in my whole 24, 23 years of life. Whenever I was in grad school, somebody had said out loud, "I don't know" is an acceptable answer, and I was just like my mind just blew up to a million pieces because I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's right. I don't have to know everything, and I'm gonna learn how to respond." And also, if I tell my client, "I don't know the answer to that," they will believe me so much more than if I try to fudge some response that I truly don't know about, and it builds rapport so much when you're just honest as a clinician. So, yeah, I love the power of I don't know. I think it's awesome.
Okay, this might be sort of a controversial take, but
Yeah.
you don't have to answer if you feel it's too, I don't know the word, maybe marginalizing. But do you think that conferences act as a sort of capitalistic mindset that forces a person to become product over human? And then at a counseling conference, wouldn't that in turn be oppositional to the actual nature of our typical job duties?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's too much of a controversial question. I think it's a good one. I think my stance on that question is like my stance on a lot of other things in life that, you know, I could choose to look at it that way because there's a lot of evidence that it is what you just described. However, if I go into it with the mindset of I get to learn something through this experience, other people get to learn through my experience, and the world becomes a better place because now we're all more informed than we were before we walked through the door, I'm all for it. And I think I'm a little bit too optimistic whenever it comes to things in life, but I also think that's a superpower of mine. So, choosing to walk the line on the other side of the grass is greener where I water it has been super, super fruitful for me in my life. And I think that's my answer for your question is like I could choose to see it as this product transactional capitalistic thing, but I truly in my heart of heart think that, I benefit and other people benefit. And unfortunately we have to pay and we have to do things to get there. But eventually the world, I'm hopeful that the world can be a better place if there's more knowledge that's spread, and typically it's done through organized fashions like conferences.
I love that. I'm not in opposition to that either. I think that that's a great point. The other point I would bring it to is the pressure that is placed on the presenter to
Mhm.
become product. I guess that's my next thought is okay, well, I agree when we create these spaces, it creates a sense of consumerism. But what about the person who's presenting? Are they being overpressured by the role?
Yeah, I think that is from person to person. I have people that I look up to immensely who, you know, even in Lafayette, I don't know if you know Dr. Robin Saunier, but she's fantastic and very elegantly spoken and super. I would consider her one of my like idols in the field. And even she says, "I feel nervous. I feel like I need to take a break. I am having a hard time with this." Like, even she is human. And I think that like conferences and interviews and things that, I feel like are necessary for our field. I do feel like just because human nature shows up that people feel incredibly pressured to get it right. And I think especially in our field where we are supposed to be 100% accepting and 100% inclusive and 100% all of these things because we want to make sure that we are giving good people good quality care. I think that there is a microscope on us at all times to get it right or to not say the wrong thing. And we're all kind of like moving in fear that we're going to mess up and say the wrong thing. And that's a ton of pressure, especially because if we mess up and say the wrong thing, that's not truly telling of our heart most of the time. So I do think there's an immense pressure that is put on people to get it right whenever they present, especially at conferences in front of a lot of people where it matters.
I was curious about that phrase, "It's not very telling of our heart." You use it very eloquently,
Oh,
and
thanks.
it yeah, and it really brings forward a sense of maybe the exterior doesn't match the interior due to whatever sort of anxiety or something of that nature. I was curious, where does that originate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a lot of it for me starts with my family and originates from I'm from a very small town where, there's been a lot of history of just people being unkind and unloving to other people, and my family has always both sides of my family has always moved with the heart posture of, we're going to do what's best for other people and keep their needs at the forefront of our mind, and lots of people would argue that that's self-sacrificial, and a lot of ways it is, but my family's Christian, and we have always been taught to be self-sacrificial with our love, and so I think it originates from the posture of wanting to truly display this loving kindness towards people, and I do think that fear and anxiety really immensely gets in the way of that sometimes. But, yeah, I think, just to answer your question very simply, I think it just originates from being taught that, what is inside of your heart and your intent, although impact, like I've said, has a lot to do with our world, your approach to things is really important, and how you go and meet people with this love that Christ has shown us first, and that you're able to give to other people because he gave to us first, is really important.
Now, having said that you have that religious background, do you tend to incorporate that in session? Like, do you work with folks who are atheists? Do you work with folks who do not fit the worldview? Because I know I do all the time with,
Yeah.
my own spirituality is my own experience. So I was curious, how does that tend to work for you?
Yeah, yeah, so, yes, I work with everybody, my walk with Christ is my own individual unique walk with Christ, and as a Christian, we're called to disciple other people, but, I still struggle with how this comes into play with my practice, because there's an ethical obligation to not press that on other people, and in my therapeutic role, I don't wanna persuade people or lead them to a place that they don't wanna be. And in like, Christian walk in my walk with Christ, I have this calling to, or have this obligation to, lead people to Christ. So, it's one that I'm still battling with. I've talked with multiple other people in the community and in the therapy community and my personal community on how they've handled it in their counseling profession all their life, and where I'm at currently is I I I meet people where they are. If they don't wanna talk about God and they don't believe in God, then that doesn't mean that I don't have to believe in God. It just means that we differ in our opinion on that, and that's okay, but I don't bring that to session unless it's specifically asked for. Now, with that said, I tend to draw a lot of clients who do want to have the relationship with Christ in the room, and who do want to talk about biblical theology, and so, yeah, I meet people where they are. If they're atheists, I don't have any room to tell them they're wrong. Our own experiences are our own experiences, and in my personal life, it might look different, but in my career, that's what it looks like.
Thank you so much for speaking to that because I do think sometimes for professionals, we have a really difficult time having to find a space between our values, our beliefs, and those that we help. And ultimately, it does come down to meeting people where they're at, which is really what I've always heard too. But I wanted to check in with you and see how you handle it, if it's different or similar to how I do it. And
Mhm.
we share that in common.
Yeah,
I know it's almost time to go. We've gone across the board to so many different
we
spaces.
have.
Is there any space that we didn't go to that you would like to notice about your experience, about your capacity as a helper and healer, so to speak?
I don't think so. I think I don't think I've ever had a conversation go as smooth in, like, so many different directions, so that's a testament to how you're able to navigate this with people, but
Well,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. I don't think so. I think we've covered everything that feels important.
Well, then all that's left is for you to let people know how they can get in touch with you and work with you in all these different facets and ways that you provide.
Yeah. So, yes, I'm in Baton Rouge. I plan to be here for many years to come, but I'm off of Bluebonnet currently. I probably won't be there forever, but for the time being, I'm there, and I have a website that's just Wilson Counseling Co. or wilsoncounseling.co. A lot of people do .com, but .com was taken, so I just did .co. My, trainings and my bio and stuff, I'm really big on training transparency and being able to show people that I've done what I say I've done, and, I've got an email form or a request form or all sorts of ways that you can get in touch, and then on social media, everything is just Wilson Counseling Co.
Well, thank you so much. It was a privilege to meet you. Just a really enjoyable interview. Thank you so much, and I can't wait for others to hear about you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure as well.
The Culture Therapist is created, voiced, and edited by R.C. Winters, a licensed professional counselor in the state of Louisiana. It is meant as a tool both in an educational as well as advertising capacity for therapists and those in the mental health field to let future clients, current clients, others in the field, and the general public onto their experiences and interests. If you would like to have a conversation with me such as this, where you clue in others as to what you're all about, you can reach me via email at theculturedtherapistpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, if you have questions or comments, that's a great way to reach me as well. If you thought today's topic, the interviewee, or our format is worth recognition, please follow our podcast, leave a like or a review, or please share it with any family, friend, colleague, or otherwise that you feel might get something out of this podcast. Your help in those ways is most appreciated. Until next time, may you continue to grow, may you continue to thrive, and may you continue to aspire. From The Cultured Therapist, I am R.C. Winters. Catch you next time.